Welcome to Asian American Parenting, a podcast from Rooted Ministry and the Sola Network, where the gospel meets Asian American faith, culture, and parenting. Each episode, we explore how to raise the next generation with a strong gospel foundation in Christ while navigating the unique challenges of our cultural identity. Thanks for joining us. Let's dive in. Welcome to Asian American Parenting. I'm your host, Danny Kwan from Rooted Ministry, and I want to welcome my co-host, Monica Kim from Sola Network, a psychologist and biblical counselor.
Hi, everyone.
And we're really excited to have Pastor Jason Min back for a second episode. Pastor Jason Min is the senior pastor of Citizens Church in LA. And he was also a graduate of the University of Pennsylvania and a former SAT Prep Academy owner. And we also did find out in the first episode he used to work at the admissions office at the University of Pennsylvania. So if you want tips for getting your kid in to the University of Pennsylvania, don't call him. Please don't call him. Pastor Jason, is there anything else I missed? I really love your unique background. And as you were talking about faith and academic and parenting, we thought you'd bring a unique view. But is there anything else about yourself?
No, thanks for having me. It's just an honor to be here. Pastor Danny, you're a legend in my mind. When I was out in Philly, everyone knew who Pastor Danny was. He was the youth pastor of Philadelphia. So it's my privilege to be here.
Oh, and I gotta mention, Pastor Jason, you're a actor. You were in the movie Beef, and so that's awesome. And you also are super musically gifted.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would. I guess actor would be a stretch, but yeah, I do have an IMDb account now as a result of my one line in Beef. So I guess I can say that.
That's awesome. And so we're just going to start out with kind of an icebreaker, fun question, but it's really related to this topic of parenting and faith and academics. When you first moved from Philadelphia to LA, you were doing seminary and in full-time ministry, but you also still did some academic stuff for like SAT prep and things like that. And you shared with me how you did like these, either for parents or teenagers, these seminars on, like SAT or getting into Ivy League schools. And, could you share some stories about these kind of, SAT or college prep seminars in your early days of ministry? And again, because you went to Penn and you did an SAT Prep Academy, I know a lot of Asian American parents wanted you to come and speak to them about this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, when I moved to LA, I kind of thought I left that world behind. But of course, ministry doesn't pay very well, so I needed to eat and feed my family. But so I would work with different academies in the Los Angeles area who knew about my background, who asked me to come do kind of these one-off seminars where I would speak to parents about tips, kind of insider secrets. I was probably violating some NDAs there, but just talking to them about kind of the changing landscape of admissions and how to maybe how to kind of create a roadmap for their kids to be able to be in a good position to gain admission to the schools they wanted to go to. And they would fly me out sometimes to Korea to do these seminars, in Gangnam in Seoul. So there was like a muscle confusion that happened doing these seminars, because on one hand, I had kind of my views on a lot of this stuff had shifted when I went into full-time ministry. And so on one hand, this had been my livelihood before. It was my field of expertise. So I knew kind of this was my world. But on the other hand, there was always a sense in which I felt like I was kind of feeding their idolatry, where I was, and because most of these spaces weren't explicitly Christian, I wasn't really talking about the intersection of academics and faith. I was speaking purely to parents who were just trying to get their kids into good schools. And so, on one hand, I understood the assignment, but I always felt like a little pull inside of if I was doing more harm than good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. First of all, on my end, I just want to welcome you back. We're so glad you are here again. In the first episode, when we had you, we talked about your observation and experience, especially coming from your background. And this one, we're focusing a lot more in terms of your pastoral heart as you think about parenting, faith, and academics. So we're really glad you're here again. The first episode, we touched upon this passage, but also it was related to your perspective as a pastor who wanted so much for your folks, as you shepherd them, to understand academics and all of life under the framework or the perspective of scripture. And in your experience, from that pastoral heart, how have some parents used academics in ways that negatively affected their teenagers and their faith? And are there any particular difficult or even horror stories you might want to share from your time as a tutor?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because we don't generally consider pursuing excellence in academics as sin. And I don't want to paint in broad strokes and say that it's sin, but if we define sin theologically as a fundamental distrust of God and any attempt to secure meaning, fulfillment, happiness apart from God, then what I have seen a lot are parents maybe who have put academics in that seat, where they have, and maybe more broadly, success and academics, excelling in academics as being a pathway to, career success, wealth, security, later on in life. And I think when parents do that, the danger of it is that I think for a lot of the parents I used to work with, we generally think about sin as bad behavior and, our kids doing drugs or, kind of backsliding in their faith. And people don't necessarily see sometimes an unhealthy pursuit of academics as sin as well. And so it's more dangerous when something that the world says is really good, that is constantly positively reinforced and rewarded, that those make actually the most dangerous kinds of idols. And so a lot of times I think that from a young age, these parents unknowingly and unintentionally kind of instill that kind of idolatry in their kids, feeling like if you don't do well in academics, you're not going to be able to secure a good job, secure wealth, and you're going to, disappoint your family. It's connected to so many other things. And so some of these poor students, I kind of, they used to come in looking like they were carrying the weight of the world on their shoulders, like they were their family's hope for a better life. They were their parents' ticket, to the American dream. And so that's always really unfortunate and really sad to see.
Hmm. On the flip side, as a pastor now, and even in the past as a tutor, have you seen parents use academics in a positive way that's supported spiritual growth and faith in their children? And maybe share some examples for the parents who are listening.
Yeah. I think it's not that pursuing excellence in academics is bad. I think it's putting that in its proper place, right? And I have seen parents approach kind of how they talk to their kids about academics from the perspective less of success and more from the perspective of stewardship. So this idea that, hey, maybe the way you're thinking about this is not too big, but maybe it's too small, and so teaching their kids from a young age, how are you handling that which God has given you, opportunities, gifts, the people in your life, responsibilities, you know, and kind of teaching them these really important kingdom principles through kind of the way they approach academics, I think is really healthy, and I think it can actually do a lot of good. I always say that I think sometimes we use our Christianity as an excuse for mediocrity. And I always want to tell even our people, hey, pursuing excellence is not in and of itself a bad thing. When you read the book of Daniel, he wasn't just a government official. He was the best government official. And actually his excellence was a part of how he was able to be such a light while living in exile in Babylon. And so I think there's actually a lot of really important kingdom principles that I've seen parents instill in their kids. I think also when it comes to academics, how parents walk with their kids through their academic journey, I think are all opportunities for them to model and embody the heart of God. I think about what A.W. Tozer said when he said, what we believe about God is the most important thing about us. And if you have parents who approach academics in a very specific way where it's all about the achievement, performance, the accomplishment, getting the grade, that is going to be, whether we know it or not, that is going to be shaping our kids' view of God. But I have seen parents use kind of their kids' academic journey as an opportunity to teach them things, support them, walk with them, help them process even failure, teach them the importance of integrity and honesty. So it's not just about getting the A. It's like, we want you to do it the right way. And all of these things are really important kingdom principles that I think come into play later on.
I really appreciated how you were talking about pursuing excellence is not a sin in itself, especially as we think about where is it in its place in terms of value or life kind of perspectives and stewardship. You were talking about stewardship. Every good and perfect gift comes from God. How do you steward the gifts? You did touch a little bit, you did touch upon some practical ways parents can help their children to understand faith and academics, like academics in light of faith. Are there any other practical ways that you would guide or you would want parents to be able to teach their children how to do that as they're growing up? And
Yeah, I mean, one of the best pieces of practical parenting advice I got when my kids were really young was from one of my mentors who told me, I asked them like how, because both his kids, were walking with the Lord even in their early years. And one of the things he said was, I made it a point from the moment they were born to just teach them as many things as possible. So, like anything, if it was how to ride a bike, I wanted to be the one to teach them how to ride a bike. Fixing something, if they need help with their math problem, I want to be the one to teach them that, and one of the things he was saying was, a 5-year-old child may not have questions yet about faith. Maybe some of them do, maybe not. They may want to know how to spell the word cat, and so he was like, but if you teach them enough, you kind of take on the role as teacher in their life. Like when I have a question about anything, I can go to dad or mom about it. And one of the things he said was when they got older and they started actually navigating faith and started navigating questions about God, the first person they naturally turned to were their parents, because they had gotten used to just going to their parents to talk about their questions, talk about difficult things. And so the beauty, I think, of our generation of parents that maybe our parents, not a lot of our parents could not do, was there was a lot that our parents didn't know in terms of American culture, how to live in American society. A lot of us were latchkey kids because our parents were busy at work. But I think, at least in our generation, we have much more of a capacity to teach our kids so much more. And so even if it's small things, I would encourage parents to kind of even treat our relationship with our kids as potential, almost like breeding ground for us to have bigger conversations around faith later on. And I think that's a really powerful relationship that we should steward well.
Yeah. I mean, in the second gen church and third generation church, we're still used to we grew up with youth group being separate.
Yeah.
Because of language. And now that I've become parent and you've become a parent, and the parents we minister to, they're just so used to, our teenagers being raised by the youth pastor and faith conversations kind of, again, we because of language, the first generation church, went to the youth, kids went to the youth group and parents went to the adult worship. And so faith was kind of quote unquote delegated to the youth pastor. But I guess you're kind of hinting at a model where parents take a more active role in discipleship.
Yeah. And, not only, I think, and just like how discipleship is not just taught, it's modeled.
Yeah.
I do think that's a really important piece for parents to think through. Not only do we teach our kids, but I do think probably much more than we think our kids are watching us, and, as they say, discipleship is more caught than taught, right? And so I think in the same way, so much of how we approach our responsibilities at work or even with people, I think unbeknownst to us, are impacting how our kids approach their responsibilities, their primary responsibility at that time, which might be as a student, Yeah, things like, again, integrity. Are you on time? Are you responsible? All of these kinds of things are really important.
Yeah. One angle I just wanted to also highlight as you talked about teaching is that in an Asian context, oftentimes that hierarchy of you just do as I say often comes through versus, hey, I'm going to walk alongside you and teach, and we're going to have this context in which you can ask questions and I'm going to be available to answer as I continue to teach you. That's a little bit of a different nuance, even though teaching as a parent is not foreign to the Asian American or Asian context, but the way in which the manner in which it's done
Yeah.
often is from that hierarchy of filial piety and a command or demand. Even if parents don't say it as that, just the pressure, the demand and the pressure can be experienced from that kind of piety kind of context. So I appreciate hearing about, in contrast, the nuance of teaching, almost like modeling how Jesus taught,
That's good.
being with his disciples and being able to have them ask questions. And yeah, so I appreciate you bringing out that practical, nuancial.
No, that's
that.
really good. Yeah. Mhm.
So, Jason, now that you've not just doing ministry, you're no longer doing SAT tutoring or SAT business, SAT academy. As you serve your local church and just the broader church, you're emerging as one of the great leaders in the Asian American church. As our podcast listeners think about academics and faith and parenting, are there any final messages you would like to share with Asian American parents about faith, academics, and parenting? Maybe some hopes you see for them for the future and present?
Yeah, I think the first thing I'd want to say, more explicitly, I think when it comes to parenting podcasts, and there is, I think, even in the way that Asian American parents consume content like this,
Yeah.
can be from the perspective of, okay, now I'm gonna get all these things, and now I have to like be this perfect parent. And I do want to say explicitly, and something that I'm trying to preach against is, that the way that the gospel frees us is, even as parents, we have nothing left to prove, and we're gonna make mistakes, and we're gonna need to depend on the grace of God. And so I do want to kind of first say that, because I think that's a really important piece, even in how we parent our kids and how we navigate this thing. I guess, if I could say how maybe some practical things for parents, and I would kind of broaden it from just faith and academics to faith and all the things that I think they want for their children, academics being one of them. But yeah, we talked about it in the earlier podcast, like extracurriculars, and the story that really comes to mind is the story of Mary and the alabaster box. And it's interesting, like like back then, alabaster boxes often were handed down as family heirlooms. It was to the daughter, and it was like obviously furnished with expensive oil, and it was kind of their entire identity was wrapped up in what was in that alabaster box. And I feel like our parents handed us an alabaster box, and I feel like this generation of parents, we basically want to furnish our kids with the best with the most beautiful alabaster boxes full of the most expensive oil, and again, these are good desires. I think when I talk to parents, a lot of the parents in my community, there is this general sense of like, what I just want to give my kids everything. I want to give them everything that I didn't have. I want to provide them with a life of comfort. I don't want them to struggle later. I want to set them up with opportunities and resources to help them succeed in life. And I think this is all good.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that. But if I could exhort our parents, is that I think the best thing we can do for our kids is actually to model for them what it means to be a box breaker, to show them a life completely surrendered to Jesus, to show them what it means to live every day in the reality of the love of God, and I think Arthur Brooks was just on a podcast recently where he talked about, that the biggest indicator of whether or not a child would, develop a vibrant relationship with God is if they saw the most important person in their life worshiping, or the most powerful person in their life worshiping. For a lot of children, it's their parents.
Yeah.
And so, I don't want to deny the importance of academics. I don't want to deny the importance of pursuing excellence and wanting the best for our kids. And this is how the world works. It is in many ways we're subject to the water that we're swimming in a lot of times. But I think actually the most countercultural, revolutionary thing we can do as parents is actually to show them a life that's completely, completely surrendered to Jesus, and then see how that reframes everything else, and use that as the starting point from which we talk about academics and success and future and security and things like that. And I think that it would have huge ripple effects, not just for our kids, but even for their kids after that.
Yeah. Man, I want to come to your church.
Anytime.
Yeah.
Please come.
Beautiful. Pastor Jason, thank you for coming on to the podcast, and really with your background, UPenn graduate, Harvard grad school graduate, and running a former SAT academy, but now a pastor. Really, your perspective is very unique and important, and we appreciate your voice. And for our listeners, we thank you for listening. May we embrace the hope and joy of the gospel and believe that it's true, powerful, and transformative. Thanks for listening to Asian American Parenting. See you next time. We hope that you have enjoyed this podcast. For more resources, visit the show notes. See you next time.